All right. So, so we're beginning our Advent series called Joy in the Darkness. This is a study that was provided by the North Texas Conference. And so it has several components to it that will roll out over the season. And one of them is this adult small group curriculum. Each week of the series focuses on one Old Testament passage and one New Testament passage, with the New Testament passage being the gospel, specifically the Gospel of Luke, because with the season of Advent, we begin the new Christian year, and we're entering into year C in the Revised Common Lectionary. And the gospel that's the focus in year C is the Gospel of Luke. So we will hear his story of Jesus, and specifically Luke chapter 2 on Christmas Eve, which we normally include at some point in time, even if it's year A or B. So, but there are the study guides are all together in one PDF, and it starts with an overview of the whole series, and so that's where we're going to start, because as we talk about Advent and we go through the season, it has a couple of very specific foci, has a couple of places that we focus on, and so the season of Advent begins 4 weeks prior to Christmas, and so that's why we start this weekend on the 28th. And as it says in the opening page, it says Advent is the perfect time to reflect on how God sits with us in the dark, helping us see that more is happening beneath the surface than we can see with our eyes. There's joy to be found as we dig into what it means to follow this Jesus, who was born in a barnyard delivery room without any of the usual trappings of a king. In this messy place, we find our Advent joy. So joy is going to be the overarching theme of the season, but each week we will take a look at the typical Advent themes of hope, peace, love, and joy. And that will be the particular focus of the week. But overall, we're looking at the fact that there can be joy in the darkness. And so we'll be looking at that. So let's see. So Advent is this time is a twofold celebration. Advent looks forward, or looks back to the first arrival of Christ in the manger, but then it also looks forward to the second coming of Christ at the end of the age, as the prophets say. And when we have those two things in tension with one another, the looking back and the looking forward, then the season is a season of preparation. It's a season of getting us ready for not only what has happened, but what will happen. And so we will look at how Jesus is both the promise fulfilled to Israel as the coming king, but then also how he is the promise fulfilled, will be the promise fulfilled for all nations in his second coming. So we look forward to both of those. So there's a paragraph here about Luke in particular on this page. Again, because we're in year C, Luke is the gospel reading from now until next Advent. Luke was most likely written toward the end of the first century. The author relied on Mark's gospel as well as some other source material. His audience seemed to be both followers of Jesus, both Gentile and Jewish, who gathered to hear the stories of Jesus and break bread together in one another's homes in the period following the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Luke is unique because, for one thing, he was the evangelist who felt that the story of Jesus was incomplete without showing its continuation in the life of the community, which led to the book of Acts. and they are meant to be read in tandem. So if you read from the beginning of Luke all the way through the end of Acts, skipping over the Gospel of John, you'll see a great amount of continuity in all of that. There's some distinctive themes in Luke, including the church, the development of the church diversity, embracing both Jews and Gentiles, the role of women in Jesus's ministry, the importance of the poor, and economic issues more generally. And that the key theme for Luke is that Jesus has come to fulfill the promise of God made to Israel, to restore it and to make it a light for the nations. And then also talks about how geography functions almost like a supporting actor. So it's important and it's interesting to take note of how Luke uses landscape to help tell the story. We see Jesus moving across the countryside and telling stories of people traveling and things like that. So it's an interesting way. One of the things you'll notice in this particular series is that there is a prayer practice that we're given a chance to try each week. And I highly recommend you give it a shot, at least, even if it feels weird, even if it feels like, oh goodness, I can't even do this. It's a good opportunity for you to stretch your prayer muscles over the next few weeks as we get ready for Christmas. And it can be done within the scope of your class or your group meeting time, or it can be something that you do on your own and reflect on with your group. So the study is designed that people don't need to read ahead of time. It's always helpful if they do. They'll probably get more out of it if they do. So I encourage that, at least to read through the scriptures a couple of times before you get together. But this study lends itself for folks who just show up and crack open the scriptures and jump into the conversation too. So that's fine as well. Okay. So that's enough for the front matter. Week number 1, our theme overall is hope. And the 2 scripture readings are Jeremiah 33, 14-16, and Luke 21, 25-36. And so I'll take a look at, I'll read those for us. I'm going to start with Jeremiah. It's just a few verses from chapter 33. And in my Bible, it's under the heading of the righteous branch and the covenant with David. The prophet writes, "The days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will fulfill the promise I made to the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In those days and at that time, I will cause a righteous branch to spring up for David, and he shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. In those days, Judah will be saved and Jerusalem will live in safety. And this is the name by which it will be called. The Lord is our righteousness." And then in Luke 21, beginning in verse 25, and almost to the end of the chapter, Jesus says this. This is Jesus speaking in Luke 21. He says, "There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth distress among nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to take place, stand up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near." Then he told them a parable. "Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Be on your guard, so that your hearts are not weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day does not catch you unexpectedly, like a trap. For it will come upon all who live on the face of the whole earth. Be alert at all times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that will take place and to stand before the Son of Man." All right. So again, like I said just a moment ago, the Advent has a twofold focus. One is looking back to the original arrival of Christ, and the other is to look forward to the second coming of Christ. And so, as is typical, each Advent season, the first week of the season is paying attention to the looking forward part. So the prophecy from Jeremiah, the words of Jesus, and his exhortation to be on guard and watch, are looking forward to the coming of the Son of Man. And so this is a forward-looking end of the era, end of the days kind of thing. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't actually also apply to Jesus's historical context as well, to the coming destruction of Jerusalem by the hands of the Romans. But it also has this implication of when this, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. So it's this looking forward, looking ahead at what is to come, and it's a way of having hope, or placing our hope in God and God's provision for humanity, for the world, rather than in our own ability to affect our own salvation and our own redemption. So yes, there will be, just as in Jesus's time, there was suffering at the hands of the Romans. In Luke's time, there was suffering going on at the hands of the Romans. Jerusalem itself, Judah and Israel themselves as nations, experienced suffering from different surrounding nations throughout their history. So it's this understanding that that God is continuing to move things forward until the culmination, and these visions of hope are trying to bring to light that God is still in control. God hasn't left them, hasn't forsaken them. That God is still actively at work, even when things are dark, even when things look like they have died, which is why Jesus uses the image of the fig tree in verses 29 of the parable, 29 to 31. He says, look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourself and know that summer is already near. Fig trees basically looked dead in the winter, like they lost all their leaves. It's just sticks and branches. And it looks like there's no hope. But then when springtime comes around and summer is near, all of a sudden it comes back to life. And so the leaves come back. And then there's another fig tree parable in the Gospels that talks about Jesus coming and seeing that there were leaves on a fig tree, but there were no figs. And he curses the fig tree, and you kind of have you can go back and read that too, because it's a symbol of a fig. It's a symbol of a tree or a person, that isn't producing fruit, even though it's the signs are all there. It's like it's fruitless. So anyway,
where was that? Where was that one? The other one of the fig tree.
Let's see. Let me see if I can find a cross reference here. Let's see. Got Matthew. Hold on. Let me jump over here real quick. Almost there.
That's okay. I can look it up later.
All right. So Matthew 21 has Jesus cursing the fig tree. Starting in verse 18, Matthew 21:18. And then let's see if Mark has a parallel in Mark 11, beginning in verse 12. And then Luke has a parallel as well. It's in 13, beginning in verse 6. There you go. All three synoptics have it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So the fig tree is this symbol of life emerging out of death, because it looks dead, and then at the right time, then it comes back to life. And so the comment there on week one's page is that Luke's gospel is pointing us to see with the eyes of the heart rather than what the world can see. So there's even when things look bad, God is still at work. The passage from the Gospel of Luke has it's apocalyptic undertones, and the word in Greek, it's a transliteration of the Greek word, and it's not an end of the world sort of meaning. It's actually a meaning of uncovering and revealing. It's the easiest way for me to kind of describe it is like if you have like your kitchen table, and like, okay, for Thanksgiving, if you serve your turkey on a big like silver platter or whatever, and it's got a cover on top of it, and you take the big platter to the table, and then everybody's looking, and you go whoosh, you take the cover off, that's an apocalypse. You have uncovered, you have unveiled what's under there. So that's sort of the way that that's what apocalypse really means, is that it's this uncovering, and so this revealing. And so it's a moment when God is pulling aside the veil, and we see what is hidden, what hasn't been revealed yet. And often it's dramatic, often it's evocative, and in this particular case, it's these visions of hope, both Jeremiah's vision and Luke's vision, and they are visions of hope when all seems lost. And that, they say, is how we find joy in the darkness, because oftentimes it feels dark before there is a revealing of the light. So both Jeremiah and Jesus in Luke 21 talk about suffering for a time, but that it will come to an end. If you look through Jesus's words here, particularly in 25 to 28, you see that he is quoting from Isaiah and Daniel. He's particularly Daniel 7 with the Son of Man coming in a cloud. There's all different kinds of allusions that he's making. So Isaiah 13, Ezekiel 32, Joel 2, Isaiah 8, Isaiah 5. So quite a few different places where he's drawing this imagery from, and those who the Jewish readers and hearers of this text would have heard those texts. They would have known, they would have drawn the connections back and gone, oh, he's talking about that. I remember in the prophet saying that. I remember this, and I remember this, and they're drawing it all together. So,
is what the Jews believed about, when Jesus would talk about the end of days, is it the same as what we're thinking, what it means to us for the end of days when Jesus returns, or was there a different thought process? Because I know it, like the prophecies always had sort of two meanings, one for the time, the present time, that things that were going to happen, but a lot of times it was for something that was happening in the future. So did they, was their end of days, when Jesus would talk about the end of times, or the prophets, was that a different connotation for them than it is for us?
The short answer is yes, it is a different connotation between Jewish and Christians. In the Jewish hope, it is a restoration of Jerusalem as the center, particularly around the rebuilding of the temple, and a restoration of the land that has been taken from them, and so it's a return to their home and their land. That's the restoration and the redemption that they are looking forward to. It's not it's not in the Christian sense of being reunited with Jesus and heaven per se. It's a restoration of what has been promised to them.
So they didn't believe in like the second coming of the Messiah.
Right. No, because the Messiah has not come yet for Jewish people. They didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, so they are still awaiting the Son of Man to come for the first time. And when he does, then he will, drive out all the enemies and restore the people to Jerusalem.
Okay, so the restoration that they're looking for is also the coming of the Messiah for them.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. All right. Very good question. Okay. So when you, one of the things I want to make sure that folks understand for the passage from Luke is that, especially in verses 34 to 36, is this idea of being alert and being vigilant, being faithful. So it says to be on your guard, to be watchful is the idea there, so that your hearts are not weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and the day does not catch you unexpectedly like a trap. So there's this idea that as we are awaiting the arrival of the Messiah, the Son of Man, what tends to happen is that, in much like the rest of the world, we tend towards entropy and just towards less focus. And so what Christ is calling us to, and what Luke is trying to draw us to here, is that that even though it doesn't seem like things are coming together really quickly, we still need to be watchful. We still need to be on our guard. We still need to be paying attention to what's happening, and our own readiness for the kingdom. So Jesus has told other parables about the 10 virgins, the 10 bridesmaids with the lamps and all this kind of stuff, about being ready and being watchful, about the landowner going away and putting his land in charge of different people, and not knowing when he will come back. And so these readiness and watchful parables that he's telling throughout his ministry. It draws back here as well. So in much the same way as those in Luke's moment in history would have, they were probably about a generation or so removed from the time of Jesus. They would have wondered, okay, why isn't he back yet? And so they're just trying to remind the people that they need to be watchful. They need to remain faithful, so that the day does not catch you unexpectedly. For it will come upon all who live on the face of the whole earth. And so be alert, pray that you have the strength to escape all these things that will take place and to stand before the Son of Man. So that's it's the way on the study guide, the way that it says it's an active, always at the ready type of posture, so that there's not this sort of lull to their faith, or lull to their watchfulness.
In other words, don't wait until you see the signs of the times to start getting your life together, because then it's too late. And try and be ready. But Jesus says that, where does it say? He says, this generation will by no means pass away till all things take place. So he's kind of alluding to the fact that it will happen in this generation. Sure.
One of the things that I read in the commentaries is that the phrase "this generation" is not necessarily a particular time period, but it's a sort of shorthand for those who don't believe, or those who don't follow Christ. So it's those who are believing Christ to be the Messiah, to be the one who's returning, and they're the ones who will be faithful all the way through this, and they're the ones who will see who will have the revealing and go, "Yep, now's the time." And when the others, they won't see it, and then they will pass.
Sort of like with the Exodus, that whole generation passed away because they weren't faithful, and then the new generation came up.
Yeah, and they had their own issues too, but
a few. Yeah, the next generation didn't learn any better than the first generation. It's like their elders didn't teach them well enough, didn't pass on the faithfulness that they should have had.
Yeah, so the Shema from Deuteronomy hadn't been said yet. So perhaps again, you read that and you go, you keep reading through the Old Testament and you go, no, there's no generation that really got it right. And so that continues today. So
that's sort of saying something to us that we should be trying to pass on to the next generation, and to be better than we've been.
Right.
But that probably won't happen anyway either.
Well, we'll
Who knows?
We can do our best and trust God to fill in the gaps for us. All right. So there's some reflection and discussion questions here. The first one is, what does being alert look like for you this Advent? And these are all again, it's good for them to think about it ahead of time so they have conversation, but the extroverts in the group can jump in right away. It's the introverts who need a little bit more time to process. But so what does being alert look like for you this Advent? What habits or practices would you like to try for your spiritual life over these next few weeks leading up to Christmas? It could be, the prayer practices that are mentioned for each week. It could be as simple as making sure that they're in worship every weekend. It could be, making an invitation. It could be specifically reaching out to, people they haven't talked to in a while, whatever it might be. It could be a consistent time of reading the scriptures every day, something like that. That can take a lot of shapes and forms for individuals, but it's just something to think about. So then the second question is, what are you hoping you'll see as a sign of God's deliverance in your life right now? Again, that's a personal question for folks to think about and to reflect on. And it's tied back to the idea of hope. So it's not just a wish, but it's a forward-looking kind of question. What kind of sign do you want to see from God? What do you hope God will do as far as deliverance in your life right now? People have all kinds of things that they might want to be delivered from or delivered to. So that's going to be personal for everybody. And the third question is, where might God be inviting you to bring light into a dark situation this week? And so again, it offers the opportunity to talk with a partner or a small group of people, or your group as a whole, however much you're able to share of that story. Because we as followers of Christ are called to be the light of Christ into the world, into the darkness. And so as we are seeking joy in the darkness, we realize that by saying that, it means that we acknowledge that there is darkness in the world. And so how do we bring light into that? How do we bring light into a world that seems dark, especially from the last couple of years? How do we bring joy into and light into a world that still feels dragged down by the weight of what's taken place in our world in the last couple of years? Then the prayer practice to try is called praying in color. There are lots of resources out there about this prayer practice, but basically it's to think in images rather than words to convey your prayers. So then there's a simple prompt on the back or on the second page of the work of the study guide. It talks about a barren fig tree, to draw it and not worry about being perfect. All those non-artists out there are going to be like, I can't draw. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Just go with it and just give yourself over to the moment. And then to pray silently with the passage from Luke 21:29-31, and then draw leaves to represent signs of hope, and then fill in landscape and artistic elements. Just, again, not criticizing your work and editing it as you're trying to do it, but just let the prayer shape the work. And then closing with the Lord's Prayer. So again, this is something you can do as a group if you wish, but it's also something that you can encourage folks to do on their own over the course of the week and see what they might come up with. And if you are so inclined, let me go the righteous branch from Jeremiah 33 is, I don't know, that's not quite as much of a image, and it's similar to the Luke 21 image. So you might look for another passage to give them an opportunity to do a second one, or if they just have trouble with the fig tree, then they can have another passage to look at that invites them to pray in color. So this one's this prayer practice is a little more right-brained than the others. So it's a little more artsy, but it's a good practice to take a chance at and just give it a shot, see what happens. I have a clergy colleague who is retired, but she learned to paint, or she painted for a long time and then didn't for a while, and then took it back up in retirement. And one of her things to do is to go out on her porch in the morning and add a little bit to a painting that she does. And so as she's praying and as she's reading scripture, she paints landscapes and things like that. So, and then every once in a while she'll post them on social media, see them on Facebook, and she does great work. But that's part of her prayer life is painting. She prays in color. All right. What's do you have any questions? Anything that
I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, if I want to print, these for the people in my class, can I use the printer at church? Is there
Yep.
a code that I need to print?
You can use my code, which is 2025. So you just and you can make double-sided copies on that if you wish. 2025 is the code. There you go. Alrighty.
All right. Thank you.
So you are very welcome. We'll be back next week for lesson number 2, which is peace, and we will be in Luke 3 for a couple of weeks. All right. Thanks, Gail. Have a happy
Okay.
Thanksgiving.
You too.
All righty.
Bye.